COP28 matters?
It's easy to be distracted by sort of the personalities and the theater of all of it. And it's important to sort of look through that because there really are some very important actionable goals here. We do need, coming out of COP28 to see some real progress. There is this closing window of opportunity to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's still possible physically. It's still possible technologically. The question is, can we achieve it politically? And this may be our last opportunity as that window begins to close. And so, what I'm looking at here is, do we come away with an agreement of the countries of the world, not just to phase down fossil fuels, but to do what we need to do, phase them out on the timeline necessary, reduce carbon emissions 50% by 2030, bring them down to zero mid-century? Do we see an agreement to end the funding of new fossil fuel infrastructure? The International Energy Agency has been very clear. There can't be funding, there can't be new fossil fuel infrastructure if we are to keep warming below that dangerous 1.5 degree level.
And do you think it undercuts or undermines all of this that the president of COP is also the CEO of a huge oil company?
Well, it does understandably feed the cynicism and the skepticism. There really is a conflict of interest here, and it's unfortunate. It's a distraction, and it's going to make it very difficult. If we don't see the progress necessary, it's going to be easy to point the finger at the UN, at the COP process, and the way that it, at least in this particular instance, seems to be somewhat compromised. So I think, I think the UN, I think the COP, committees need to do some soul searching here. How did we end up with, a conference, an international summit on fossil fuel emissions reductions held by a petrostate with a leader who is actually secretly making deals with the fossil fuel industry using COP28 to actually leverage deals with, oil deals abroad? It's a bad look, and it does feed the cynicism and the skepticism, especially among young folks who want to see meaningful action.
More than a bad look, do you fear the COP process has effectively been hijacked?
Well, I hope that this is a one-off. I think part of what happens here, there are certain countries that are looking to greenwash their sort of image, right? Fossil fuel companies, fossil fuel states, petrostates that are the first to raise their hand. Yes, we want to host COP28. Why do they want to host it? Because it's a way to sort of launder their image a bit. It's a way to make it look like they're working towards solutions when in fact they're really engaged in actions that are worsening the problem. And so I think that's part of the problem. The people who raise their hand first, the countries who raise their hand first, are going to be countries that have an agenda, in this case, a hidden agenda. And so, yes, I think we do need to see reform. It very clearly indicates we need to see reform in the whole process. But we need the COP process. We need the Conference of the Parties. It's the only existing multilateral framework that we have for addressing the climate crisis. We need to keep it.
So I know you've done a lot of work on communicating these issues to the public. First of all, what would you say to those people who remain climate skeptics, who think the whole thing has been got up, it's a plot, it's not real? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say look out the window. The impacts of climate change are no longer subtle. We're seeing them play out in real time in the form of unprecedented extreme weather disasters here in the United States, there in the UK, Europe, Asia, around the world. So, it's not tenable anymore to deny that climate change is happening or that humans are driving it. But there is still a vocal minority, and with a sort of megaphone of social media that's been weaponized to make it seem like there are far more climate deniers out there than there really are. It's a shrinking minority of individuals, but there's a powerful machine, the fossil fuel disinformation machine behind it, which makes it seem like it's much more widespread. Where the conversation really is now is, what do we need to do to solve this problem?
Right. So let's look at the much, much bigger group of people who may be regarding all of this and they simply see it as too big, too terrifying to involve themselves in. Yes, it's something for big oil companies and petro-states and governments to talk about, but not the here and now. People tell me to stop eating meat or stop flying. Why should I do these things? Address them.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's really important because, there are things that we can do in our, individual lives that decrease our environmental impact and our carbon footprint. We should do those things, right? They make us feel better about ourselves. They often save us money. They set a good example for other people. But that's not what's going to get us the systematic changes that we need to decarbonize our civilization on the time frame necessary. The most important thing that people can do is to use their voice and their vote to put pressure on politicians to talk about the climate crisis, make sure it's forefront in our public discourse so it puts pressure on the politicians to do what we can't and institute the policies that will lead us away from fossil fuels.
And so what, finally, about another group, which are those people almost infuriated or demented about what's going on? I'm thinking about some of the more aggressive protesters, the people who stop sports events, clog up the roads, who get in the way of public life. Do you think they are helping or not?
I think their heart is in the right place in many cases, but the numbers, and we've done some polling, our own center here at the University of Pennsylvania has done some polling on this. It doesn't appear to help. The really extreme actions that seem to target, people who aren't part of the problem, individual, everyday people trying to get to work or trying to enjoy, a Sunday at an art gallery. Let's make sure that we target the bad actors here, which are the polluters and those who are furthering their agenda.
A very good thought to end on, Professor Mann. Thank you so much for talking to LBC. The UAE